So if I was turning back the clock and raising that first round of money, what I would do is talk to as many people as possible, even those people who you don't think are going to lead to those introductions, because if I look at that first list of angel investors, it came through some pretty improbable ways, and then or I should say half of them did. And then the other half are exactly what you would expect, is build those lifetime relationships, because half of them, quite frankly, are Holly's co-workers from previous companies who have started companies and been very successful and wanted an opportunity to back Holly again.
That was actually going to be my definitely do is don't underestimate the influence that you have now depending on what job you're in. Maybe it's not where you're going to end up eventually, but if you do a really good job and hopefully leave people with the impression that they would work with you again in a heartbeat, because you never know when those relationships will come around. I've been doing startups between Boulder and Denver for about 15 or 16 years, and 3 of the 5 companies previous to this, founders and CEOs, are now investors in BlogFrog. Service Metrics, one of the founders is an investor. The 2 of the founders from Left Hand Networks and the president from the previous company I was with are all investors and board members for BlogFrog. So, and it was funny, I still remember Kelly Long is one of the founders of Left Hand, and Left Hand did really well, and Service Metrics did really well. So I happened to help be a part of creating a significant success for some of these folks. I remember going for a walk with Kelly saying, because he wanted to invest in this other startup, and I was like, well, if you're looking to invest in companies, let me tell you about BlogFrog. So we went for a walk around Pearl Street, and he said, okay, I'm in. I'm like, well, don't you want to meet my co-founders? Like, no, I'm in. Like, don't you want to see the deck or see the business plan? No, I'm in. And that was literally how that investor conversation went. So, they don't all go like that, but some of them do.
Which is so funny, because I'm going crazy, having hundreds of meetings around with all these random individuals, trying to make that right connection to that person with the right fit. Holly just called me up, and I just closed another 50,000. It's like literally she was like 75%, and I was like 1% on my meetings.
So this is a question I get all the time. Aside from having a co-founder who has friends who are just in on trust and reputation alone, how do you find angels in the area?
So talk to everyone because there's not a great list. I mean, there's of course angel lists these days, which is debatable its usefulness. It's really better for filling out rounds after you've got people interested. And so most angel investors, I wouldn't call them professional angels. They don't have this large portfolio, and they aren't out marketing to large investments. And it's just a lot of that networking that I talk about, finding those people who channel you to the more specific people, and finally they get you to the co-CEO or the CEO of a previous company who since sold his business, and he's probably not a professional angel. We call a professional angel someone who's done 10 or so investments, but he's just looking to make a couple deals. He wants to give back a little bit, and it's that strange networking, but it works. It's fascinating. What would you say?
I would say make introductions. So the people who are interested enough to invest probably know other people, and they probably have more influence over those people than you do. So it was a lot of, okay, great, I think at one point we even said, for every investor we meet with, let's get 2 other names from them. So we would just start kind of telling 2 people and just meeting with everybody who would hear us out, and specifically looking for people in this space. Like we, at the time, our beachhead were women bloggers. So we looked for people who had run companies and sold companies and made money off of the women's space. And some of our investors came specifically from that. Rustin presented at the Angel Capital Summit, and there happened to be 2 people there who came listening, to the presentations, looking for companies that were looking to do something in the women and parenting space. So you just kind of have to find, instead of looking for the generalities, look for people who have connections to some of the specifics, whether it's your demographic, maybe you're in the mobile space, maybe it's social. Just kind of keep a radar for that.
I would definitely apply for all the accelerators. We didn't do an accelerator. This was pretty early in the accelerator days. And since Holly already had those relationships, it didn't make as much sense for us. But yeah, it's funny, the angel, and then apply for the pitch events. Never pay to pitch, except for the Angel Capital Summit. I think we pitched. I think we paid. I think we broke our own rule. We didn't pay very much. But that's where we did find that last angel investor we needed to close the round, because if you ever raise money, you set a threshold, because no one wants to be the only one at the party. So you say, I'm going to get at least this much, and we needed that last one to invest. And they did, and actually she's now our VP of Finance, so we got a 2 for 1.
Open Angel Forum, did you all present there?
We did. This was before Open Angel Forum.
So this is it's an interesting mix of informal relationships that you leverage, and in terms of formal organizations, Open Angel Forum has about 3 events per year here in Boulder. It's competitive to get in, but if you can, it's a very high quality group to be able to pitch to. So last question, in terms of where are you now? What has to be right about the world for BlogFrog to scale up, and what is the biggest risk factor that keeps you up at night?
So I have kind of wear a marketing hat. I run marketing, client services, and publisher development, which is just our influencer network. And they get it. The influencers get what, their value, because they're more and more, they know they need to be compensated, that they're worthy of being compensated. Brands, there's still a lot of money being poured into online advertising, even when the average click-through rate is 0.04%. And so when effectiveness is declining, but spend is increasing in an industry, it's not because marketers are doing it on purpose, it's because there's a lack of alternatives. So our window of opportunity right now is to make a lot of noise about the alternatives in that space before somebody else does. That's messaging, that's positioning, it's making the right partnerships. And one of the reasons we took funding is because we realized if we could do that in 5 years, we could have done it without funding. There's going to be a winner in that space in about 18 months. And in order for that to be us, we knew we needed to accelerate a lot of our plans. So that's the big challenge. That's what keeps me up at night.
And who else is the competitor that's vying for that space right now?
Well, there are different ones. So if you remember, the 4 pillars of our product are identifying influencers, like who's influential. Well, that's what Clout does. They don't distribute any content, but there's a lot of emerging technologies in the identify space. In the activate space, that's how do you get people to actually create content? People are doing that manually. Distributing content. Those are aggregators where you can push content to Twitter and Facebook and Foursquare and Pinterest. And then there's lots of companies emerging in the measuring space, like Radian6 and Crimson Hexagon and all these analytics spaces, but nobody's doing all 4. So we do have competitors in those different spaces, and we just have to make sure that agencies want to go one place to do it all instead of 4.
Hey, where we are now, as Brad mentioned, we're 35 people. There's so much more to the story, the different pivots, growing, making those first hires, making your first senior hires, and then bringing in that kind of second wave of talent after you close the deal. But we're growing fast and dealing with those growing pains, for lack of a better word, and when we're doing well, but it's the next type of challenge. It's not how do I get my free Wi-Fi, because I'm not going to pay $10 for it. It's how do I scale my sales organization to cover across the country and not have bickering over territories, right? It's a whole different type of problem. And so what has to go right in the world? We need people to keep creating on social media, because there's no social media influencers without social media. So as long as people keep favoring creating and consuming content inside social media experiences rather than more of a professional experience, and that serves us well. And then finally, what keeps us up at night? So right now, I think I kind of mentioned that, it's okay, now we're here and we become a 35-person company. How do we become a 100-person company? And that looks very different than a 35-person company. And we have to learn a lot of it on the go. So Holly's been part of some bigger startups, but for me, I only know every stage as it comes. And so having that mentor network is so valuable, because I can call up Todd Vernon and say, Todd, help me out. You just scaled legit to this. You got it sold by Federated Media. What did you do in this stage when you needed to scale that sales team? And he'll talk to me about it. But that's the biggest thing, is how do you you're always getting to that next level. And it's like any engineers in the room, it's that big problem that the professor assigns you, and it just keeps going and going, and it never ends. But that's okay. That's why we like it.
When you said what has to go right in the world, it made me think. The first thing that came to mind was, when advertisers and brands realize that they're contributing to a $62 billion industry that's based on a product nobody likes. Someday they're going to wake up and realize that, and the world will